All right, thank you, everyone. I have a few little housekeeping details just as we virtually file in. I'm Gracie. I'm here representing Print. So if you have any questions during the discussion, please feel free to enter them in the chat box, which is on the bottom right of your screen, or in the question and answer function, which is on the bottom bar of your main screen. If you'd like a copy of tonight's book, I'll include the link to the print page in the chat box, and that way you can click right on through. And now for tonight's speakers. Marianne O'Hara is the author of Cascade, a novel that explores what lasts. It was the Boston Globe Book Club's inaugural pick, a finalist for the Massachusetts Book Award, and a People Magazine Book of the Week. Little Matches is inspired by 9livesnotes.com, a blog that Marianne O'Hara kept while her daughter Caitlin was waiting for a lung transplant. Since Caitlin's passing, she has been certified by the University of Vermont's Larner College of Medicine as an end-of-life doula, so that she may better speak to the state of end-of-life care in our culture. Little Matches is this week's People Magazine Book of the Week, which calls it bracingly honest and deeply comforting. Susan Conley grew up in Maine. She's the author of 5 books, most recently Landslide. Her writing has appeared in the New York Times Magazine, the Paris Review, Virginia Quarterly Review, Harvard Review, New England Review, and Plowshares. She has received multiple fellowships from the MacDowell Colony, as well as from the Breadloaf Writers Conference, the Maine Arts Commission, and the Massachusetts Arts Council. She's won the Maine Literary Award and the Maine Award for Publishing Excellence. She's the founder of The Telling Room, a youth creative writing center in Portland, Maine, where she lives and teaches on the faculty of the Stonecoast Writing Program. So please join me in virtually welcoming Marianne and Susan.
Thank you so much. Susan, I'm so proud of you. Listen to that litany of wonderful things.
Oh, that is hi. That's not why we're here at all. That we could have just.
No, we're here because we're friends and we're going to talk about books.
We
I'm
are
so happy to be here. Thank you so much, and thank you, Print.
Yes, thank you. We love you, Print. So I just want to welcome everyone too and say that I am much more than a moderator or an interviewer tonight. I am a dear friend of Marianne's, and also someone who was shepherding or rooting for this book from the start. So tonight's going to be a very intimate conversation, and we're going to be free ranging, and we're going to start with you showing your video, right?
That's right, because the video will give you an idea of the arc of the book's narrative and the questions I ask in it, the journey that I as a writer go on. And I'm going to share the screen here and make it work.
After I lost my daughter Caitlin, I looked for revelation. I became every human who has ever looked for answers to the hard questions. Where is she? Is she? Is there more to life than this life? Does consciousness survive death? Does my existence serve any real purpose? Does anyone's? So I wrote Little Matches from inside real-time grief, and I asked those big life questions. Caitlin became a real sage for all of us. She had so much wisdom. And the last couple of years, while she was waiting for her lung transplant and she was on oxygen, it was easier to write than to speak. After her passing, many of her friends shared her writing with me, including text messages, conversations that would have been lost forever were recorded. So all of her old soul wisdom is in the book in a really cool way. I know I'm not the first person to lose what's most important to me. Humans lose all the time, and lose hard. Little Matches is for anyone who loses and asks, now what?
Okay, we're back. We're back.
We're back.
Oh, I'm so glad you showed that. Yeah,
now
I feel like we were all maybe like orbiting and then we all just landed.
Yeah, I'd love to give a shout out to my brother Michael, who made that video for me. I'm so lucky to have him as an artist brother. And I just wanted to say too that the whole point of the book is really not about me writing a book of our misery, but really a book of inspiration for other people. And we very intentionally took the book from inside the house, me asking those personal questions and living inside my own grief, and then out to the outdoors, to the more universal, to the bigger questions, the bigger picture. And that's what I really, well, actually the book's been out almost a week, and what I'm really excited about is that people are finding it really inspiring and comforting, and that's why I wrote it. I didn't really write it for me, for catharsis. I wrote it really for other people and for Caitlin to establish her legacy.
I love hearing that. And that does shift it, doesn't it? It's such a different way to approach the writing, not catharsis, but for other people. It's leading me to a question that I hadn't even thought to ask, but it feels really organic. I know writers who've written books, Marianne, because they felt like the book they wanted when they needed it wasn't there.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I have students who are writing books right now because they were going through grief and they felt like they were going through a specific grief and they couldn't find the book for that. And I wonder if this feels a little bit like that for you, if Little Matches is in any way feeling like a book that wasn't there that you would have liked to have had.
Yes, and when I first started writing it, people told me, you're too close, it's too close, wait a while. And I thought, no, I need to write this from inside the real grief, because I wanted a record of it. And I knew that a year, 2 years, 3 years later, that distance would make the story different. There's just no question. Human memory doesn't work that way. And writing from right inside of it was so raw, but I also was very careful to not write in a sentimental way and to keep, I used white space. I was careful to just sort of say what happened and not put my own emotion into it and try to make the reader feel emotion. So it was interesting because on one level I was definitely writing as a writer, but the other split side of me was falling over the keyboard crying a lot while I was writing it. But my brain was always clicking and crafting it. So it was an interesting experience, and I wrote a lot of it in a fever. And I honestly don't remember a lot of it, except that, I keep a good journal, so I have notes of how I felt.
I love that. I love that you're a copious keeper of
am.
History, really.
And that helped me write the book too, because I really relied on my old journals for going back in time. And I had those details that you would forget. You would totally forget. Our memory doesn't work that way.
No, and your memories and your details in this book are they're like little pieces of gold. They're just so well put, like the positioning of them and their little revelatory moments, and then their banal, wonderful little moments. And okay, so I know we have a lot of writers and people writing books with us. So I know that you and I were thinking we'd talk a little bit about craft and process.
Okay.
But I want to go back first because, we've been friends for so long and we've shared our writing life together. And so it didn't take me long after Caitlin died for me to know in my heart that you were probably going to write a book about it. And I felt like I couldn't even say that yet because it was like a burden and you were like orbiting it. And I know that you also were thinking it, but neither you or I were putting words to it yet. Remember that phase where we weren't putting words to it?
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to ask you now, before we talk about the actual process, is just, was there a moment where you were like, oh yeah, maybe? Was there like an emotional glimmer? Like, where did it become accessible to you that you might write a book?
Literally, it was the 9-month anniversary of her transplant, and it was also our wedding anniversary. And Nick and I were walking around Walden Pond just talking about, Thoreau and the Transcendentalists and what we were doing with our lives. And I really felt like I had no rudder. And I thought, well, if the blog posts that I've been writing on the Nine Lives Notes blog, if those posts are helping people, because I was getting wonderful letters from strangers who said that my very honest, it was kind of brutally honest sharing of stories and ruminations really helped people cope with their own issues. I thought, well, why not? I couldn't imagine writing nonfiction, writing memoir was the only kind of writing that seemed to matter at that point. And so I thought, okay, I can do that. Maybe I can manage to function like 20 minutes a day and write a sentence, but at least it's a sentence. It will keep me going, and I'll put one foot in front of the other, and that's what I did. So I started it literally 9 months after her passing.
Mm. And I love how we're breaking through any like rules or ideas of when you should write deep, hard emotion, right? You're just like, write it raw, write it from inside it.
Yeah.
So alive in that way and so deeply compelling. And I just feel every time I drop into it, I just feel like I'm in a movie in the best way.
Good.
So then you start writing, and it's a very like structured thing because it's hard. And I thought I thought maybe you could share some of that process with us. You wrote really compellingly about it in a LitHub essay, and I wondered if you could just read some of that because it's so good.
I would rather read from it because when you write, you can make everything sound good, but when you talk, sometimes it's not so articulate. So,
Yeah, well, this is just so you did it so well. I think it'll be really helpful for people.
okay. Well, it was a LitHub essay about going. I was somebody who never wanted to write the personal at all, never. And fiction was my thing. And then, suddenly this was the only kind of writing that mattered. So I found the process both easier and harder than writing fiction. Easier because I knew the pieces of the story. It was just a matter of artfully putting them together, or so I imagined. With no wonder or curiosity about where my imagination might take me, I expected that it would be more of a slog to create that first draft. But it was no more of a slog than any first draft. I think they're all slogs. So much of it was no different from writing fiction. You bring your people to life. You choose which details to include, how to shape the particular story you are trying to tell. Happily, the joy and magic of writing, of discovery, happened as I wrote the memoir, just as it always had with fiction. The hardest part of writing the personal was, well, that it was so personal. I began the process only 9 months after her death. People asked me why I was doing that to myself, but it felt important to write from inside real-time grief, to make a record of it. And there was another reason too. I feared that my memory of her would not fade, but morph into a version of Caitlin who had never quite existed. Who she was in real life was splendid enough. I wanted to write that person, share her writings, immortalize her in a small way. She who had not been able to author her own legacy. I could only function in small doses, so I took to setting a timer and writing a set number of minutes each day. Every Monday, I sent my pages to a writer friend who promised to expect those pages and keep me honest. After the book was well into production, I woke up one morning and thought, what have I done? I've bared my soul. There is no fiction label to shield me, but it was done. It is done. It is here at last on my desk. Look at it. Isn't it so beautiful?
It's beautiful.
It's so beautiful. We writers often finish a piece and look on it with admiration that is almost outside of ourselves, wondering, how did I do that? How did I write those words that flow and connect? How did I knit those layers into that tight narrative weave that reveals nothing of the labor that went into the process? I paged through this book that has miraculously managed to come to life and try to grasp that I did it. Was the process as effortless as its beauty makes it appear? Of course not. I pick up my phone and search for a video I'd taken early in the book's creation. It's a little trick of mine, one I've developed over the years, and it's not just for writing. When times are hard or when a task is difficult, I make notes or recordings to myself to have later, so I can counteract the amnesia that inevitably sets in when a thing is done. The concrete reminders serve as motivation when a project or activity seems too difficult to proceed with. So we're going to show you the little video. It's from January 25th, 2018. Okay, if you ever manage to finish this book, make it into something good, I want you to remember how impossible it seemed on this day when you had hung it all up and then put it into piles and tried to make a coherent story. Pages are everywhere. There's just piles and piles and piles and piles.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I
So
was.
effective.
That was a point where I had to take that video because I thought, I don't know that I can do this.
Yep.
I really didn't know. And I thought, well, at least you'll have a record because you will have that amnesia once, oh, look how beautiful it is and it's done, it's perfect. Yeah.
Oh,
So,
I think that's just gold and so generous of you to share with readers, and not just readers who are writers, but all readers, to see just your voice, the part where you're like piles and piles and piles. It looks overwhelming, and yet you made it through. You made it through to the other side. And let's talk a little bit about this act of trusting people, trusting writers, and you trusted me to receive the pages. And I hope that everyone could be so lucky as to have someone that they could trust with whatever project they're doing, whether they're writing a book or some other artistic project or anything in their life that matters deeply to them. And in this case, we're talking about narrative. But when you sent them, did that feel kind of comforting to know that like they were going? Yeah. Can you talk about that a little?
oh, for sure. It's so important. It's hard when you're a writer and nobody's expecting your work. And then also when you know that you might finish it and there's nobody wants it, looking for, everyone knows what it's like to, any writer knows what it's like to try to get something published, to get rejection notes for stories and such. Finding an agent is hard. And then when you have an agent, the agent has to try and place it with an editor. So here I was at the very beginning of writing something I wasn't even sure I could do, but I knew I could trust you because you were so professional. You're like a professional writer and teacher, and I knew that you would hold me to my decision to write pages and stick to a goal. I just needed someone to expect those pages. Someone knowing that somebody was expecting them made all the difference. And if I hadn't had that, I think I would have been adrift, really. It really helped me so much. And I really appreciate it so much.
God,
it's hard to believe it's like 3 years ago. Like 3 years just went by in a flash, but 3 years ago I was really in the slog of that first draft. I had a goal to have a first draft by June 30th of 2018.
You were super goal oriented. That's a key. And the slog, you were willing to slog. And I remember once you were traveling, and I knew you were traveling, and I didn't hold you accountable. And you wrote me and you were like, why aren't you mad at me? I missed the deadline. You need to be mad at me. And I was like, get with it. I was like,
really?
Where are those pages?
Exactly.
So I'm always struck by just that sense of if there's just the smallest bit of community and for the writing to live in.
Yeah, can I just say how envious I am of the Maine writing community? I was so sad when you and Lily moved up there, but man, you moved into a great place and you have a wonderful community. It's so supportive. I'm always so impressed by that.
Yeah.
It's nice. You've got it there.
And we have such incredible bookstores,
I know.
throughout the state, all over.
In this small city, you've got 2 wonderful bookstores that I know of. Are there more than 2?
More wonderful bookstores.
Yeah.
So now let's talk a little bit about what I would call like framing devices for this book. We have the title, which is a huge kind of frame and metaphor and also literal phrase. And then we also have these questions. And I remember when I first received pages from you, I had more of my editor's hat on. Remember, I would give you notes at that time, and then we kind of, then it hit its stride, and it was beyond that. But I remember in the beginning, remember when we were like mucking around in it a little, I remember saying like, I think the central questions will rise up. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what will they be? And they're so resonant now. Like,
I know.
and I wanted you to speak, if you could, to did they write themselves and did they evolve? My sense is that they evolve.
They
And
did evolve, and it was because I was writing from inside the real time grieving, where it in the author hat was on, where I knew that I couldn't just have a series of anecdotes or me just flailing around. It was there was purpose, there was a point. I was looking for answers to questions, and so in the book I'm showing me searching for answers to the questions and how I search for the answers to questions inside of science and soul books and the natural world and human relationships and all of that. And so, yeah, those questions evolved as I was suffering and as I was asking the questions and seeking the answers and coming to some conclusions. So it formed its own arc. And yet at the same time, obviously, like somebody asked me last week, how did I craft the book? And, obviously I never set up an outline, but there's a structure sort of in your head. It's sort of like when you're telling a story. Any good storyteller knows that you've got all the information and you think, well, I have to tell this part first, and then I tell this little bit, and then I tell this little bit, and you just sort of shuffle it all together. And the same sort of thing, it was just sort of artful, the way it was just like instinctively the pieces were shuffling together once I had that first draft. And then the next year was really, deepening it all and making it richer. Because the other thing I love, I mean, if you really have a bunch of writers out there, my favorite thing is like what I refer to or think of as like a weave. Even a short story is just this thick tapestry of threads. And I love when I've got a draft of something to take like a colored pen, like the red pen for all of this thread, and go through the whole book and make sure that thread is tight throughout the whole weave. And then, this thread and this thread and this thread. And then eventually you've got this wonderful weave. So that to me is the fun part of writing, after that first draft is written and you get to work on the weave. So
I love that. I just love that.
the weave.
I felt like I was seeing that tapestry. Wow.
Yeah.
Maybe this is a nice time for you to read a little bit. And before you read, I know you're going to read a first source material. You're going to read from Caitlin's words, and I thought you could just explain how many sources you were using. Like it's like a multimedia kind of book in that way.
It somewhat is. Aside from my own prose and ruminations, it was very important to include Caitlin because her writing exists and needs to be read, and she needed to be a part of this book. And actually, I really realized when I read from this book, I need to read. I can speak for myself, but the only way anyone can hear from her is to hear me read her. So there are. I mean, it's not one of those like a bunch of letters or diary entries at all. It's mostly text, but I do have text messages. I have emails that she sent to people, notes that I found of hers after her passing, and yeah. So and honestly, like a few like little drawings are in here. Well, like this is the notebook I found.
Wow.
In her bedside drawer from when she was first really, really sick, and it was clear she was going to need a lung transplant. And I found this little notebook that had the word life on it, and she had only written on one page right when she was really sick and wondering what was going to happen to her. Okay, so I'm going to read, right? I'm just looking for the page, sorry. Okay, so this is an email that Caitlin wrote to a friend who had had a successful lung transplant. And this was when Caitlin was first waiting for her lung transplant. And I mean, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I would love to, because she had a great, she had great reading taste. Like I'm reading Primo Levi's periodic table right now, and every night it's like a tonic. I only read one chapter one element. Do you know it? I share a birthday with him, and maybe I know too much about astrology and am unfairly influenced, but I can't help but feel an incredible kinship too in relation to his writing. So anyway, then later she said to her friend who had had the successful lung transplant, I completely agree that the moments when I have felt most free, most okay with what is happening, and least anxious have been those moments where I am able to let go and surrender. And I think this is for anybody who deals with any kind of anxiety. When you're trying to control a situation you really can't control. Interestingly, those moments seem to work in tandem with my faith in myself. I know I can trust myself to get through something, to hold on, and ultimately I can just let go of the rest. So I guess since we have no idea where we come from and where that strength comes from, that true belief in yourself, in your intent to be a good person, is sort of divine in itself. No more or less divine than believing in something someone else told you to believe in. I have always believed in goodness, and I know a lot of people say that, but it does feel undeniably essential, and I don't question it. As humans, we somehow know that we should aim to be good. And where does that come from? If I can follow the fact that I can trust in the importance of goodness, then I can maybe trust that goodness will come of goodness, if that makes sense. Kind of like karma points. I have never felt like, why did this happen to me? As I am sure you haven't either. It isn't even because of some virtue that I feel that way. It just has never occurred to me to be pissed off about my lot in life, or to think that there was some unjust reasoning behind it. Instead, I honestly feel lucky sometimes that I have gotten to feel and experience things that others have to struggle longer and harder to learn. And that's kind of Caitlin's like serious side in a nutshell. Truly. She had a really good attitude.
I'm so glad you read that part. It's uncanny. I spent some serious time with that email last night, and then it has stayed with me all day. Of goodness. And that voice, she's such a direct and beautiful voice on the page. She's also, Caitlin was so funny, and her humor is infused in this book. And yes. She loves Joni Mitchell, and she loves a lot of other incredible music, and she loves food, and she loves fashion and rags.
Yeah,
she loves
rags,
right?
Yes,
you want to explain that? We want to explain her like love of rags.
Well, we both had a love of rags. Like we both really like, nice clothes and going to Paris and all that. But we also really, there was nothing better than a rag with like lots of holes in it and really super comfortable. And we'd be like, yeah, that's a good rag.
Yeah, comfy.
It was so funny. Yeah, she was.
Yeah.
Such a good buddy.
So, I think there's going to be people who are holding on to hard stories out there that are going to be so touched by this book. They already are. And I'm wondering for the people out there that are thinking that they might access their hard story, and not, maybe they're going to write it. Maybe they're going to write an opera about it, or do a movie, or who knows, but they're going to access their hard story. Could you speak to someone who went in and told the hard story and is here now with us on the other side of slogging, and how that feels? And can you tell us, why we should do it?
Well, as I said, I really did it because I thought it would make a difference and there would be a point to it. It wouldn't just be for me. I know the story. I don't need to tell myself the story. And I am so heartened by message. I mean, the book's only been out since Tuesday, and people have written to me to say they stayed up all night reading it. Friends of Caitlin's and people who never knew her. And one lady, and she might even be watching tonight because she was from Southern Maine, wrote to me and said, that's it, I'm quitting my job. Like, why am I living this life I don't want to live? I was just like, yes, that's why I wrote the book. I love that. And my deepest wish is that people will read this book. And I know I'm veering off from the question, but I'm coming back to it. Will read this book and really think about purpose and their own lives, and the fact that we all live a temporary life. We all live this arc of a lifetime that will end. Not to be macabre in any way, but think about it and really think, like, are you living the life you want to live? And if you're not, like, I know it might sound easy to say do what you want to do, but like, you can take small steps. You can figure out ways to live a better life that's good for you. And so I would say that if your hard story can help somebody else, absolutely. And if your hard story, if you do need to tell yourself the hard story, that's fine too. Maybe I know a lot of us figure things out while we are writing, right? So if you need to write your hard story to really figure out like why this happened or how it affected you, that's fine too. There are no real rules, are there? I think if it helps anyone, and if that, including that person, is yourself, then go for it. And writing is such a wonderful thing anyway. I would never discourage anyone from writing.
Yeah, you're reminding us that we often write to learn.
Yes.
The best writing, I always feel the most alive writing is writing that is in the act of learning, right?
Yeah.
Not in the predetermined answer. And that kind of gets us back to the questions that your book asks. And I wanted to just talk about how open-ended those questions are, that questions in a book like this or in any kind of artistic pursuit, they're not necessarily meant to be answered definitively, right? And I wondered if you could speak to that.
Not at all. I mean, when you're asking big life questions like what is the meaning of life? I mean, come on, if you've got the answer and it's, set in stone at the end, well, it's a little ridiculous. But throughout time, humans have asked those same questions, and they're worthy questions. And it's always good to get one person's perspective on possible answers. I found that with this book, I wrote down what happened, and I came to my own conclusions. And I think that's what's key, is for people to really think about the big questions and come to their own conclusions. Because like Caitlin said, believing in yourself is no more or less divine than believing in something someone else told you to believe in. But when you can believe in yourself, when you know something, an early working title of this book was Knowing, and one of the chapters is called Knowing. And there's just that feeling, and we all know what it feels like when you just know something is true. Doesn't matter what anyone else says. I mean, this is a little thing I've been using when I quote from, there's a quote of Caitlin's that I use because I had given this to her when she was first waiting for transplant. It was in her Christmas stocking. And I had said, oh, the world will be yours after transplant. But I was using it one day, and then I happened to be talking about, the big questions and the looking for answers, and nobody really knows the answers, So use your own thoughts. I mean, and there was a time not long ago when people thought the earth was flat, and you can see why they thought the earth was flat. And yet people were like ridiculed and worse for believing the earth was round. So I think they're asking the big questions is fascinating, and I do that in the book. And poke around in science and mediumistic people, good ones. There are a lot of frauds out there. There are some good ones. So just sort of searching everywhere and trying to come up with some answers as to why I should keep putting one foot in front of the other. And I also talked very openly about, Caitlin had a lot of anxiety when she was first waiting for transplant, and, saw a really good psychiatrist in Cambridge and who helped her. There was a time when I really didn't want to live. She was my person. I did not want to live. And my husband, just said, hey, there's plenty of time to be dead, bud. And a friend who just finished the book said today that was a powerful line. And it was, So in that, I guess that comes to another key thing in the book, that Caitlin wrote this wonderful Mother's Day post as a surprise at one point when we were waiting for transplant. And at one point she said, I just want to tell people who think that you can really get through anything if you have to on your own. Haha, I'm here to tell you can't. You need people. And I wouldn't be here without my mom. And I feel the same way. Like if I didn't have people like my husband and you and my family and my wonderful friends afterward, if I was just alone, I wouldn't want to be alive either. So it does all come down to that human connection. And there's a point in the book where I talk about Caitlin. I was like fretting about, like my career and all this. And she, one day in Pittsburgh, and she just said, oh, and she just said it in that way, like that Caitlin way, like, oh, Mom, you think all this is important, but all that really matters is loving people and being kind. And when you see that statement printed, it just looks so like simplistic. But really, at the end of the day, what else is there? If you're at the very end of your life and you're about to depart for who knows where, what really matters? But, the love of the people that you cared about. So those are the big things in the book. And I'm happy that it's resonating with people. Really, really happy. It just makes it all worthwhile.
It's so fun to watch just a week in the life of the book.
Mm-hmm.
The before and after in a life of a book is so intense that there's this incredible silence and feeling like there's a barrier between you and then the book gets published. You've been carrying the book around for months and years, but finally it goes out in the world, and then suddenly it's connected and there's all this wonderful connectivity. And will you talk to us about the title, just so we can we all know what Little Matches is?
It's from Virginia Woolf, from To the Lighthouse, which is a book I've always loved, and which Caitlin loved. I was always proud of her that she had such good reading taste and liked Virginia Woolf when she was a teenager. And I just always loved the passage, what is the meaning of life? A simple question. And actually, let me just see. I should memorize this. What is the meaning of life? That was all. A simple question, one that tended to close in on one with years. The great revelation had never come. The great revelation perhaps never did come. Instead, there were little daily miracles, illuminations, matches struck unexpectedly in the dark. Here was one. I did have that memorized, and then it just went right out of my brain.
You had a lot of other things on your mind.
I do have a lot on my mind right now.
But how does that, why were you like, oh yeah, that's it, Little Matches?
Oh, because it's just me looking for meaning, looking for light, finding my, grief is so dark and heavy, but I firmly believe that, all of nature seeks balance, and grief seeks light, always seeks relief. And that's one thing I really believe, is that grief can live alongside love and joy and all of it. Grief is part of being a human. Grief is the other side of love. You wouldn't grieve if you didn't love someone or something. And I think we all experience grief all the time as humans in varying doses. And certainly in the last year, people have really, even if you haven't lost a human that you love, you've lost something during this pandemic. So I think grief is something we all know. And I think that seeking relief and light is important. And remembering that, like, I'm always going to grieve Caitlin. Always. I wouldn't want it any other way. But I can grieve her and still be a smiling, joyous person who's grateful for life. Because, again, we are all temporary. We are all just a little spark in the dark.
And I think you just described the book so well, in the sense that the book grieves, but the book also laughs and sings and eats and has lots of wonderful sneaky humor and jokes. You and Caitlin were constantly I don't know, perhaps it's hard to describe how close you were, but how entwined your lives were, because you were, as you say right away in the book, you were her primary caretaker. You were her person. when she
was.
got sick, and you were her soulmate before that.
Yeah,
Um,
fortunately, we were always really close. We just sort of clicked as people anyway. And then when, you've got a sick kid and you spend weeks in the hospital growing up, you develop a very close relationship. And, I'm grateful that she was able to live as an independent adult a lot of her life. I was never happier than when she was like in her apartment with her boyfriend, who's watching tonight, actually. He's from Maine. Hi, Andrew. And yeah, so I was never happier than when she was able to live independently. But I also always had to, CF, you can get sick overnight and in the hospital you go. And then in our case, we had to move to Pittsburgh for 2 years, which is explained in the book. But yeah, 2 years in Pittsburgh. Like one day you're sort of living your life and you've got all these plans, and the next day you're like, we're going to Pittsburgh and we don't know when we're coming home. We're hoping it will be a few months, but in reality it was 2 years of waiting for a lung transplant. And so the pandemic, I know a lot of people have experienced that same kind of feeling, that wait a minute, you had all these plans, no, they're over. You're staying inside your house, you can't go anywhere.
yeah, you were living your own lockdown. I was very
Yeah.
struck by that when I came to Pittsburgh and saw your life. It was an entirely contained life,
And it
and
was very insular.
you were the person.
Mm-hmm.
And again, the book is so good at this idea of bringing the reader in, and it's so what I would call generous with the reader in terms of its cinema and what it shares, and so you really feel like you're there, and so the reader has great connection to these characters.
Yeah, we're
And
characters.
yeah.
We are. Come on in.
Yeah.
Seriously. No, yeah, Caitlin is a great character, and she really does come to life in the book, and I love that. I feel like she's kept alive in this book, and in a really wonderful way. And I just have to read you this wonderful message I got today from somebody she had briefly gone to high school with. I won't read the whole thing, but she just said, I just wanted to tell you that Caitlin is one of the most lovely souls that I've ever known. Through time and space, her energy and light, they stick with me. It is hard not to get emotional as I type this. Caitlin is amazing. I say is because she is absolutely right here, and she is incredible. Thank you for Caitlin, and thank you for your book. Caitlin helped me a lot in high school. I was very anxious and never felt quite like I fit in. Caitlin always made me feel so comfortable. She was my friend. She is my friend. I mean, it was just made me cry when I read that. I was so happy. It just makes it all really worthwhile.
It's an extraordinary example of why you wrote the book.
Exactly. So.
Oh, well, I'm seeing Gracie has.
There's Grace.
Yes, I'm out of the Zoom ether with some audience questions. I'm hoping we can squeeze in right before we're done. Thank you both so much for this. I hate to interrupt, but
thank you.
I do want to get to these questions. So the first one is, which memoirist did you look to for inspiration?
Well, interestingly, when I first made that decision walking around Walden Pond, I came home and I wrote a blog post and I said, I'm not going to be writing on the blog too much. I've decided to write the Caitlin book. And a writer friend said, oh, have you ever gone to any of Dani Shapiro's memoir writing retreats? And I said, no, I never heard of them, but I wrote to Dani and asked about them. And she only has them once in a while, but the universe conspired to make me go. And this was so in November. And I had to write 10 pages. So that 10 pages was, you read those 10 pages, Susan. Those were the first 10 pages. And it was really hard. It took me 2 months to write 10 pages. But it got me started. And during that time, I read Dani's memoir, Devotion, which is about a search for meaning. And it really resonated with me. And it was just like the right book to read at that time. But certainly I've read, obviously, when it came out, I read The Year of Magical Thinking. And I loved it. Although I must say at that time, I remember thinking, she's kind of fortunate that she got to be such an advanced age before anything really bad happened to her. And then yet her daughter hadn't even died yet when she wrote that book. So she got slammed with it all too. Yeah.
The next one that came in is, who were some of Caitlin's favorite writers?
She loved Virginia Woolf. She loved Gilead. She hasn't read the latest one. She loved Marilyn Robinson. She loved the philosophers. She really loved uh, some of the philosophers I don't even know. She read some really thick, dense material. And actually, I just recently found her acceptance to a master's program at BC in philosophy that she had applied for, like right before she got sick enough to need a transplant, and just realized, like, why am I can't do this. She lived in limbo for so long. Man's Search for Meaning was a favorite. She loved Primo Levi. You know when someone asks you, like, what book are you reading right now and you can't remember?
I thought that was a very good answer. I would have,
Yeah.
you did very well.
I do know that feeling from working in a bookstore, and you're like,
I'm
I'm
sure.
reading everything and nothing. Okay, I actually have two questions here that are kind of related, so I'm going to lump them into one. Can you talk about your work with mediums, and in what ways was mediumship most helpful to you?
Okay. Mediums, it's an interesting topic. I was not seeking a medium at all. I never really looked to that. I was interested in reincarnation. There's been a lot of really interesting reincarnation research over the years that Caitlin and I had both read, the University of Virginia stuff from, like, for the last 30 or 40 years. Mediums, I know that there are cold readers and frauds out there, but shortly after Caitlin's passing, a friend of hers said she was seeing this well-regarded medium, and I didn't really I write about this in the book, I didn't really like the idea of it. I just was like, oh, I don't want to hear there's nothing. I don't want to know there's nothing. And she said, this woman, like, she had a whole page on her website, how to protect yourself from frauds, and she was pretty down to earth. And this particular friend of Caitlin's really didn't know Caitlin all that well, and couldn't really verify a lot of what the medium said, and she gave me the recording to listen to, and it was I write about it in the book. It was rather convincing. And then I had my own blind experience with a medium, and I actually put the whole transcript in the book because I wanted to just show what it was like. It was a blind reading. She only knew my first name, and in the beginning it's kind of like, okay, I wasn't really impressed. But I also write in the book that Caitlin's cousin in Ireland has this ability, and she from the very earliest days, and I've known her since before she was born, she had this gift, and it's grown and developed as she's gotten older. She just turned 33. So I know it exists, and I know it's real. And this particular woman that I talk about in the book, and then this other medium that they've both been, like, blind certified, and they do a lot of work with bereavement groups. They're very noble, good people, and they both also have had their brains mapped while they've been in a psychic trance state reading, and their brains show significant abnormalities when they're in that state. So there's a lot of science that's out there. It's just really hard to prove these kinds of things, but it's definitely there's something to it. And so I found that helpful, but I always say that with a caveat, because I just talked to a reporter today, actually, who said that she had a reading with someone who she knew looked her up and read her grandmother's obituary. So you have to just be careful. That's all. Do your homework. Don't be gullible. Don't throw your money away.
All right, I think we have time for two more. Someone asked, what were the biggest differences for you from writing a novel and a memoir, apart from the subject matter being different, but did you change any of your craft or techniques when switching genres?
No, I really didn't. That was what was kind of illuminating about it. Writing is writing, I find. And to me, it's telling the story, if I'm writing for an audience as opposed to my journal, I'm looking to make sure that people are interested and want to turn the page. Clarity, beautiful prose, all of it. It wasn't really, I always feel like writing is writing. Thanks.
All right, we have time for one more. It came in through email, which is why I'm looking down. Is there a particular, I know you read from that journal that you found in Caitlin's desk, but is there a favorite letter or email of Caitlin's that you really cherish?
Oh, the Mother's Day, the birthday and Mother's Day cards. They're so wonderful. As a matter of fact, I made a little stamp. I made a stamp out of her signature. It was, her nickname was Kitten Caitlin. It was like a joke, and she would sign it. And this was from a Mother's Day card, and I had it made into a little stamp. So when I'm signing books, I'm stamping Caitlin's signature on it too, because she's like, "Hey, I want credit. I wrote part of this book." So yeah, and I will say that people, you know, if you lose someone, man, text message chats are gold. You really feel like you're brought back into the moment. You laugh. It's like you're right back in that conversation again. Text messages are kind of cool.